The first thing I wanted to discuss about Game Pass is the topic of its viability and its sustainability. So for this, Wesley Winpool has an article here called "Sony just did a better job of convincing me than Xbox." 20th of July. Quote. Microsoft has run up against questions about Xbox Game Pass's financial viability ever since it launched the subscription service. Is Xbox Game Pass too good to be true? That's the question Eurogamer's Chris Tapsell asked in a recent feature, speaking to developers and Microsoft executives to try and find out the answer. Despite all the insistence from Microsoft that Game Pass makes sense for the bean counters in Redmond, I've had my doubts. How can something so good value, something that offers all Microsoft's first-party games and an increasing number of third-party games day and date, make financial sense? When you consider you get an Xbox Game Pass for £1, bearing in mind he's saying £1 as in £1 here, and you get a 3-month trial for £1 and then it goes into full after that. It really does seem too good to be true. Like Epic, with the Epic Game Store, I assume Microsoft was burning through millions of dollars trying to get Game Pass off the ground. And for Microsoft's first-party development efforts, I've wondered how Game Pass can possibly make sense. With spiraling development costs on the current gen of consoles, how can first-party exclusives make a profit when you can play them for next to nothing via Game Pass? It doesn't help that Microsoft hasn't announced an official figure for Xbox Game Pass subscriptions since January. Then, Game Pass had 18 million monthly subscribers. Surely that number has grown over the last 6 months, but to what? During Microsoft's recent financial results reporting last night, the company did not provide an updated figure. Just this week, ex-PlayStation executive Shawn Layden questioned the sustainability of the Game Pass model and its potential to expand the market. Here's what he told GameIndustry.biz. It's very hard to launch a $120 million game on a subscription service charging $10 a month. You pencil it out. You're going to have 500 million subscribers before you start to recoup your investment. But that's why right now you need to take a loss-leading position to try and grow that base. But still, if you only have 215 million consoles out there, you're not going to get 500 million subscribers. So how do you circle that square? Nobody has figured it out yet. Apart from what sounds like dodgy maths and Microsoft's big bet on cloud gaming to help it hit hundreds of millions of new players, Layden is touching a nerve already plucked by current PlayStation boss Jim Ryan, who said in the past that a subscription type model would be unsustainable for PlayStation studios because it often sees its first party game budgets grow to well over 100 million. Sony has a subscription service of course, but it does not release its first party exclusives to it day and date. The difference in strategy between the two video game heavyweights is stark. And so, I was surprised to find myself somewhat convinced of Xbox Game Pass viability from an unlikely source today, Sony itself. It just announced PlayStation 5 hit 10 million in sales, an incredible feat, especially given the pandemic. That means it's still the fastest selling PlayStation ever. But within the announcement is a note about the success of MLB The Show 21. MLB The Show, developed by Sony's own San Diego studio, launched on Xbox and PlayStation in April. It is now the fastest selling title in the franchise's history, with more than 2 million copies sold. But here's the kicker. It has reached 4 million players. MLB The Show sent shockwaves through the industry when it was announced it would launch day and date on Xbox Game Pass. It is perhaps the highest profile third-party Game Pass get yet. Remarkably, MLB The Show, a Sony-developed console game, remember, was available at launch on Xbox Game Pass, but not PlayStation Now or PlayStation Plus. Xbox owners could pay £1 to pay for a month, whereas PlayStation owners had to pay full whack. Xbox Game Pass effectively doubled MLB The Show's player base, which surprised me. I imagine everyone involved is happy with that, considering the games as a service nature of the title. And the Xbox Game Pass didn't hamper sales of the game either. As Sony says in its press release, MLB The Show is the fastest selling title in the franchise's history. Sony's press release, more so than anything Microsoft has announced or said so far, has shown Xbox Game Pass can make financial success with some titles. I think it'll be interesting to see whether Game Pass is equally lucrative for single player games as opposed to multiplayer games that benefit from expanded player bases. and the potential for increased microtransaction revenue. Microsoft bought Bethesda, which specialises in big budget AAA single player games such as The Elder Scrolls and Fallout, and with the expectations that all games from the company will launch day and date into Xbox Game Pass. Will The Elder Scrolls 6 be as big as The Elder Scrolls 5? Until we find out, perhaps Microsoft should gift Sony a free Xbox Game Pass subs. It feels like the right thing to do. So, clearly, both current and ex-PlayStation executives seem to be taking pot shots at the X-Pass game model. Now, Microsoft haven't came out outrightly and said, yes, this is profitable. There is a small chance that it isn't. But from our side of things, we could do some back of the napkin mathematics here, or as Shawn Layden put a circle around that square. So we're going to get a bit numbers heavy now. I will do my best to keep the numbers clear and concise despite the Scottish hindrance. So we know for a fact at the moment that Game Pass has 18 million subscribers, okay? Now for these examples I'm going off Game Pass Ultimate, which includes your Xbox Live Gold, or I think they recently renamed it something else. But the fact is, most games have an online component, so I doubt there's too many people out there going for just the Game Pass segment of it. There will be, but I imagine over time, as over the next 7 or 8 years, as this generation proceeds forward, more live services, etc. I think the Ultimate version is going to be the go-to for most people. So again, we're going to use that as an example here. 18 million subscribers, $15 a month, American. On a monthly basis, that's 270 million gross profits. Not net profits, which is when you take off your costs of running, paying all your employees and stuff like that. A year, that is a confirmed 3.24 billion a year. Again, in gross profits. So, at the moment, it's in pretty good standing. I mean, obviously I don't know the exact costs of running for Microsoft, but if you do a little bit more back in the napkin, I'm sure Xbox only employs something like 700 people worldwide. Bearing in mind there's not that much sort of back end. It's not like a retail business where you need front of house staff, etc. You're talking just executives basically, and social media, customer service, etc. No, customer service would usually be outsourced, I'd imagine. But 3.24 billion. Right, we'll come back to this in a few moments here, because I want to look at the future, because it will grow as the generation goes on. Now, according to Windows Central, their senior editor Jez Corden, as of April, bear in mind this is now July, Xbox has supposedly topped 23 million subscribers. Not too hard to believe that growth. I mean, we're still in the middle of a pandemic at the moment. The Bethesda thing certainly pushed subscribers, I'm sure. Now, let's do some updated math here. Let's go off the 23 million subscribers. Again, $15 a month. 414 million gross monthly. Now, let's look optimistic. Let's look at the future, at where Game Pass could be in a year or two from now, okay? Now, I'm going to peg 50 million to be conservative. Now, why 50 million? Now, the Xbox One is currently 49.63 million units sold. Okay? So, seeing as we're seeing a growth in games in general, I think it's easy to assume the Xbox Series X and S combined will exceed that. Now, I've not gone above 50 million because, again, we want to try and keep it conservative, and also want to look more short term, again, the next 2 or 3 years. But still, why 50? That seems like quite a large number. Well, I'm factoring in the fact that this also includes PC gamers, and it will also include cloud gaming as that grows. So I think 50 million long term isn't too much of an ask. So let's go with 50 million. Again, $15 a month for subscribers. That's $750 million a month. Let's put that in the yearly perspective. All businesses operate on a 4-quarter basis. So over the 4 quarters, $9 billion in gross. $9 billion. Now, let me try and put a circle around this square. God of War reportedly had a budget of only 44 million. Okay, that's the standard that most PlayStation gamers expect their games to be at. Now, Shawn Layden says, something in the vicinity of 120 million for a budget for a AAA game. But again, 9 billion in revenue. Now, again, this is me looking towards the future. At the moment, they're looking at about 3.5 billion, at least 3.5 billion. I really struggle to think that Xbox as a business, now, I'm just talking as a business, I really don't think it would cost any more than $1 billion to run that division of Microsoft. Obviously, Microsoft funnels money into the Xbox division, but as its own individual entity, the costs of running their offices, the cost of running their servers, things like that. Maybe licensing games for Xbox Game Pass maybe costs a little bit more. Let's just say that's another $1 billion. So $1 billion for running the business, $1 billion for licensing content to keep the subscription afloat. That still leaves $1 billion to spend on, your games. That means, let's take the God of War example. Like 44 million. Math is not my strong suit. 1 billion. So you could probably make a God of War level tier game at least 6 times. Is my math right there? I'm sorry folks, my math is not my strong suit, as I just said. In the example of the yearly, let's go back to the 50 million example. 9 billion, right? Let's throw a number there. Let's just say it costs 5 billion for all of their expenditure to bring it down to their net, okay? Offices, licensing, all that stuff. Money set aside for any lawsuits, those kinds of things. So let's just say out of that 9 million, 5 billion goes towards all of their costs. That means 4 billion in net profits to reinvest. God of War, 44 million. You make 9 God of Wars in a year. 9. So, to kind of put a rubber stamp on this, I don't believe in this narrative that Game Pass is not sustainable. I think the only thing that can make it unsustainable is project bloat. Yes, games are getting more expensive to develop, but it's only as expensive as the studio makes it. You hear about these games that are made by 2 people. Games like Death's Door, which just launched on Xbox. I've not had a chance to play that yet. But let's just take their salaries. There's no way that Death's Door costs 120 million to make. It's studio expectations that sets the development price. And yes, obviously, the bigger your game gets, the more staff you have to hire, and the more that the costs go up. And then you have to factor in marketing and stuff like that. Well, Xbox Game Pass is a marketing thing in and of itself. I'm not looking online for trailers for games and stuff like that at the moment with Game Pass. I'm looking at just what was recently added. Now, obviously, I'll hear most of the games for the grapevine, for Twitter and what have you. But for the most part, if I launched the Game Pass app on my Xbox and I look at recently added, oh, there's a game I've not heard of, I'm just going to try it. I just don't buy the narrative that it's not financially feasible. That's all I'm saying.